welcome to the Lunchroom webinar series. So my name is Rajendra Singh. I am with the DAES at Toronto Metropolitan University. This is the first session in four-part webinar series where we are bringing together school leaders and educators who are implementing these phone-free policies across Canada to just chat about what's working, what's not, and what are the lessons that they can share with others. So we are looking forward to that kind of amazing chat. But before we go there, few quick things. So one quick note, the session is going to be recorded and we'll lightly edit it afterwards to kind of like share it as a resource with others. And second thing, we have a great lineup today of the speakers and panelists. But first, let's hear from our executive director at DAES, Andre Cote.
Okay, thank you, Rajender. So a great setup. We're really thrilled to have people here today for this first of our lunchroom webinars. And so I'll go very quick, and I'm joining you actually today from Toronto City Hall, which is a really cool building. We're actually very busy day for the DAES. We're doing some stuff here on supporting Toronto with their AI strategy and a big event, and linked to a big focus of ours, which is AI literacy and skills for youth and in K to 12. Something actually we've been working on with Kathleen, one of our great partners on this from the EdCan network. And so just to say, the DAES is a think tank based at Toronto Metropolitan University. Our big focus areas are innovation and technology, education and skills, and democracy, really working at the intersection of those things. We have been working for about a year now on a project called Heads Up. And it really nicely is kind of at the intersection of those three themes around technology, education, and democracy, and some civic aspects. Heads Up is a Canada-wide campaign to reclaim focus, learning, real connection by advancing phone-free school policies, with a focus on doing so from bell to bell. And the aim is, with less distraction, students are free to think, they're free to join in, to work together, to thrive. The project has two major components. First is our work across the country, really to support folks in K-12 systems to mobilize around phone-free classrooms. So this includes policymakers at the provincial level, but also school boards, principals and school administrators, frontline educators, and parents and other communities in and around schools. How to effectively advance these policies and importantly put them in place at the level of the school, at the level of the classroom. And secondly, really exciting, we also have a youth champions program. Our sense was youth voice is often not included in these conversations, and so we have a youth champions program that's engaging high school leaders from across the country, and equipping them to be able to engage their peers, their teachers, their parents, and other communities on these issues, thinking about how to effectively put these policies in place in schools, and also some broader issues of digital health that we know young people are really grappling with. So I would just, in closing, also say we're really thrilled to have both the EdCan network and our awesome colleagues at the Phone Free Schools movement as partners on this. And it's just one of the many things we're working together with both these groups and with many others across the ecosystem on. And so, Rajender, with that, I will hand things back over to you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Andre, for the great setup there. Now I want to invite two of our partners on this particular series. So first, let's hear from Kathleen from EdCan. Quick intro about EdCan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rajender. We are delighted to be here as partners on this series. The EdCan Network is a national charitable organization that empowers K-12 education professionals by mobilizing evidence, practical expertise, and network intelligence to enhance learning and well-being in schools and school systems across Canada. We connect education professionals and researchers to generate evidence-informed insights in our schools and school systems. We produce practical tools that educators can use immediately, and we offer a national network that helps education professionals learn with and from one another from across all jurisdictions in Canada. And one of the things we have heard through this network is while there is a lot of support for phone-free policies and cell phone restrictions in our schools, where they're in place, we hear it does enhance the learning. The students are paying more attention. They're better able to connect with each other. But we've also heard that there's been a lot of challenges with implementation. Provinces have developed policies. The implementation gets downloaded to the school districts, to the schools, to the teachers, and sometimes that creates a lot of uncertainty. So we are very excited to be here to learn about what is working across Canada so that we can share that message further. Thank you, Rajender, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathleen. Now I'll hand it over to Mileva, co-founder of Phone Free School Movement, to have a quick intro, and then we'll get into details later.
Thank you so much, Rajender. Thank you for inviting me to be here. We're really excited to be a part of this web series with you guys. My name is Mileva Rapaski. I'm the co-founder of the Phone Free Schools Movement. Our movement is a national nonprofit dedicated to giving youth the freedom to excel academically and socially without the pressures and harms of phones and social media during the day. With a background in clinical psychology and as a parent of 4, this work became deeply personal for me when my oldest child faced serious mental health struggles. The experience opened my eyes to the profound impact constant digital access and social media pressures were having on the youth. It ultimately led me to co-found the Phone Free Schools movement alongside Sabina Pollock, who had experienced the same situation with her eldest daughter. We now focus on strategic growth, advocacy, and community outreach. Today, we work closely with school leaders, policymakers, and partners to provide practical, research-informed resources, including implementation toolkits, research collaborations, and online communities that support meaningful bell-to-bell phone-free policies in K-12 schools. We're also proud to partner with organizations like Fair Play, a leading voice in protecting children's well-being from exploitative and harmful practices in digital environments. They helped strengthen the development of our toolkits and ensured that they were grounded in child-centered research and best practices. Our goal is to elevate the conversation around focus, well-being, and healthy school culture, and to build a collaborative movement that helps students truly thrive and move our help and support into Canada to support you guys. Thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you. Thanks, Mileva. And Mileva is also one of our panelists, so we'll hear more from Mileva. So those were our partners, and a great setup from our executive director, Andre. And we also have in the background my amazing colleague, Catherine, supporting with the tech and also with the promotion. So all the messages you are seeing from the Deus account is a work by her. And now let's actually open to the panel. So if all of our panelists can turn on their videos, I'll do a quick intro and then we will dive into the discussion. So we have Dean there and Scott, Mileva. Yeah, okay. I'll do a quick sort of like a introduction, basically. So Scott Williamson is a principal with the Halton District School Board in Ontario. He has spent over 30 years in public education, 13 of those as an administrator. And he has been actively working with staff and parents and students to address the impact of digital media on student well-being and achievement in his school. So welcome, Scott. And then we have Dean Graden. He's the principal of St. Thomas High School in Quebec, and he has spent 20 years as a high school science teacher before moving into the leadership roles across elementary, secondary schools, basically. And you have already heard from Mileva, co-founder of the Phone Free School Movement, which works with schools, parents, and policymakers across the US to support evidence-based phone-free policies in K-12 schools. So welcome, Mileva, welcome, Dean and Scott. Before we kind of like dive into into the detailed conversation, like few things for the panelists and for the audience also. So first thing is like a request, and also I'm going to give a very challenging task to our panelists here. The questions will be very straightforward, but they will demand concrete, nuanced answers. So the challenge is to kind of like limit those answers to roughly 2-3 minutes. And I'm sorry, I know this is difficult, but I'll kind of like keep nudging if there are more details needed, or if we kind of like need to move to the next part. So that's first. Second, to the panelists, if you kind of like want to build on what the other person is saying, and if you can wait for your turn, that's great. But if there is something that kind of like needs like immediate addressing or hot take there. So please raise your hand, actual hand, Zoom hand, and just kind of like go ahead there. And for our audience, we have a great audience there. I was just quickly looking through the list and some of our partners and collaborators and supporters who has kind of like through the past year worked with us. For please, if you have any questions, put those in the chat, and we have reserved in the end like 8 to 10 minutes roughly to kind of like go through your questions. And you can also kind of like if someone has already asked the question, you can just vote their question to the top, basically. So that's another thing. So with that setup, let's actually get into it. So let's start with actually Dean. So Dean, introduce yourself briefly from what I have already introduced, and then also tell us a little bit about your school, and also basically where is it located, how many students, what grades, and also give us a snapshot of your phone policy. Like, is it a full day, half day? What devices are included into that? And before we go to Dean, can I request Mileva and Scott to keep your videos, if that's possible? Yeah, because during the panel discussion, we'll just keep it on. Yeah, okay. So, Dean, go ahead. Sorry.
Back to me. So hi everyone. Good afternoon. Coming to you from just outside of Montreal, Quebec. I'm the principal at St. Thomas High School in Pointe Claire on the West Island. We are a 7 to 11 school, which is high school in Quebec. We have roughly 1,100 students. Our cell phone policy came into effect in the 2019-2020 school year. It was before my time here. This is my second year in this building, but in 2019-2020, there was a broader initial restriction that was in place that was modified slightly in the intervening years. But at the moment, we have a bell-to-bell system where as soon as they're supposed to be in class, the cell phones are not to be in their possession whatsoever, right till the last bell of the day. But before and after school, they are allowed to make use of them.
Okay, and can you also throw a little bit light right now? What devices are covered within your? Is it just phones? Is there anything else also?
So our students have their own personal laptops or Chromebooks that they use for academic purposes. So there's no real limitations on other devices. It's primarily a cell phone thing. As I mentioned before, our schools had that policy in place, but many of you in other parts of the country may not be aware. But effective in this school year, province-wide, there is a cell phone ban all across Quebec in all schools. That took, again, just this year.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We'll get into the details of like how you kind of like enforce this, but let me go to Scott now. So Scott, basically same question to you. A little bit of your introduction, your school's introduction, and then what does your policy look like?
Hi, thanks for having me, by the way. I'm thrilled to be here and talk about this topic for sure. Yeah, I've been a principal of Aldershot this is my third year. When I came here, there was no cell phone policy. This is something we developed since in my time. I can get in later in terms of what was the motivations behind it, but a lot of it is clear impact on cell phones on students and behavior and those kinds of things. But so that's sort of the timeline. So it was the year of September 2023 when I came in, and that's when we began to implement a plan. And so Aldershot School is in Burlington, Ontario. It's a small school by most standards. We are grade 7 through 12. There are only 3 schools in all of Halton that fit that criteria. So we have 245-ish grade 7 and 8 students, and we have 625 currently grade 9 through 12 students. So that's the size of the school. This school is what we refer to as like almost like a generational school. Someone goes to the school, they grow up, they have kids, they find their way back, and then next thing you know, their kids are coming to the school. It's very similar. So it's a very close-knit community. We have 3 feeder schools, K-6 schools that feed into us, but we also pull in students for our STEM program who come from our neighboring board and from outside of our school catchment area. So we have a little bit of a hodgepodge of kids that are coming to us. Key thing that when we talk about things, anything around technology, et cetera, is that at our school, from a socioeconomic standpoint, we literally have families who barely have anything and are struggle to make ends meet, all the way to those who have really lovely, expensive cars who are sending in with their kids every day. So we have the whole gamut of that in terms of what it looks like. In terms of how the plan operates, so if you want me to shift to that, so we started we actually stole the idea from one of our sister schools who were using it for their 7s and 8s. So we implemented in September of 2023 bell to bell, no cell, and that was with our grade 7 and 8 students only at that time. And the expectation was for those students that their phone was in their locker. And so there certainly later we'll talk about some of the challenges around that, but basically that's the case. You keep your phone in your locker. Since then, it's evolved a little bit to include the reality that kids use their cell phones to buy their lunches. So we've accommodated that piece. But the following year, when looking with my secondary staff, they were begging for us to expand into the secondary level. And that was music to my ears because it was the direction I wanted to go anyways. So we expanded into grade 9s. We started with grade 9s in September of 2024. The start of this year, we've expanded into the grade 9s and 10s. Next year, our plan is to go full school. So what does it look like for the secondary kids? It is not keep your phone in your locker. It's a little harder with those guys. So the expectation is your cell phone is away. We do not have, we investigated the idea of having hooks. You put your bag on the hook in the classroom. It was going to cost us thousands of dollars to install the hooks. It just isn't a reality. But what these kids are expected to keep it away during class time. They can have their phones moving from one class to another, and they can have their phones at lunchtime. That's not a battle that we wish to engage in. And we understand the importance of connectivity, et cetera. So that hasn't been an issue. We leverage, as a policy, relationships. So when we talk to Scott, go ahead.
Scott, we'll come to these tactics of like how are you enforcing policies in the kind of like the next round of question. But quickly, kind of like for everyone's context also. So Scott's school is located in Ontario. Ontario's official policy, as they have announced, is like till grade 6, it's bell to bell. But Scott has voluntarily, proactively gone ahead and kind of like bell to bell, no cell till grade 9, if I'm correct. And
grade 10 now. We're
grade 10 now.
Up to grade 10, yeah.
And next year extending it to all the grades. Grade 11, grade 12. Yeah, okay.
Correct.
And then we'll come back to the questions around the enforcement, but thanks for that context.
Okay.
We'll go to Mileva now. So Mileva, a little bit of a different question from the school's context, a little bit of a zooming out here for you. So give us a bit more specifically about phone-free school movement. We'll come to what is happening in the US later, but how did it start? Like you told us a little bit in the beginning, but how has it grown? And what precisely phone-free school movement, exactly what do you do to support schools and policymakers in US around this policy?
Wonderful. So phone-free school movement began with Sabine and I, like I had mentioned. We were working locally within our own school district to try to change the environment to better support our children who were struggling. We quickly realized that it wasn't just an issue in our own homes with our own children in our own school. It was a much larger global challenge. We heard from teachers and administrators who saw that phones were quietly eroding the classroom attention, the social connections, and student well-being. We began by speaking with administrators, teachers, psychologists, physicians, researchers. We were collecting stories and real-world examples from them and quickly realized that many schools needed a clear playbook. So that we built one. We built a toolkit to help answer a lot of the questions that we were hearing. At Phone Free Schools Movement, when we say phone free, what we actually mean is bell to bell, from the very first bell of the day to the last bell of the school day. For us, that means that all personal phones and smart devices are not on the student's body and are not accessible during instructional time, during transition times, or free periods. Emergency communication definitely remains available through the school established systems, but the goal is really to remove that constant personal device access that disrupts the learning and social development. Today, when we support schools, we do that through practical toolkits, through our research partnerships, a national ambassador network, training webinars, and a private community hub that we call Circle, where administrators, researchers, legislators, and advocates can share implementation lessons with each other. They can connect locally with each other and learn from the lessons from each other, which is an amazing tool that we've given to everybody. We've also grown from a handful of volunteers to a national movement with ambassadors and research partners and dozens of schools that have used our resources and surveys to implement meaningful evidence-based phone-free policies. And when we say that we're supporting schools, it's not just handing them our toolkits and saying, we wish you well. We really hold their hand through the entire process. So we're having Zoom calls with them and phone calls with them, answering the questions, developing the right resources for them. If they want to tailor some of the pre-drafted letters that we have, we help them do that to appeal to the right audiences. We engage with them to ensure that the communication, the transparency, the policy that they're developing all works to support the mission that they're trying to do in their schools. And we follow them throughout the entire process. And we do that by, again, following up throughout the iteration of them putting out their new policies, answering the right questions. And the biggest benefit from us is we're actually learning from them as well. So when we see that they've implemented and they come back to us a few months later and we talk to them again and we find out what worked and what didn't, it then allows us to kind of recreate another aspect or an iteration of a toolkit that we might have not even known the right answer for yet, because implementation works very differently across, and we're not even just in the United States. Obviously, we're helping you guys in Canada. We have people all over the world. We've been working with people in Africa, Switzerland. We have a lot of people, and we're learning a lot of things from the partnerships that we have. And it's really allowed us to continue to develop the resources to support all of this work.
Amazing. And I will maybe in the couple of rounds later I'll come to the question around the customized support because that's super interesting. How does that work? But let me go back to actually to Scott. So Scott, help us now unpack the how does this basically enforcement work in your school? So there is a policy bell to bell no sell, but how is that policy enforced? And is it enforced in the same manner across classrooms? Does it vary from classroom to classroom? Where do phones go? What happens if some student is not able to follow the rules? What is the ladder of kind of consequences? How do you deal with that? And later on, same question will come to Dean also, but just kind of like, right now for Scott.
Okay. So first off, it's all about relationships in terms of the approach that we're using. We literally are it in terms of a school trying to do it at this level. We certainly could have come in with the draconian, like you do this, out the door you go, you're suspended, etc. But that's not the way we want to operate. If we want to change behavior, that's not the direction we wanted to go. So the expectation, as I said earlier, is that the students have in their locker with the 7s and 8s is there's a because it's elementary, there's a lot more eyes on with staff. It's a very different. They're in one part of our building, so often I'm up there in the hallways. Able to see when kids have phones, or I'm there when they're putting them away, and we just help to remind them that, because thinking about how old they are, you're talking about a 12-year-old, right? They need reminders. We've been fairly successful with it. Staff basically are there to continue to remind them if a kid has their cell phone out. It's not berating them in classes. It's say, hey, okay, great, out you go. Let's put it in your locker. Let's get back to the learning. Where we do run into occasional power struggles, and it has happened. I can't say that it doesn't. I directed them and said, look, I need you guys to have the best strong relationship as possible. So if it gets to a point where you feel like you cannot manage it, it does happen occasionally, but not very often. Usually it's a text down to admin and one of us comes up. Usually it's me. And I'll come up and I'll address it. We include the messaging with parents, with assemblies. Like this is not unknown to them. There's not a gotcha moment. They know exactly what the expectations are. So that's more with elementary. With secondary, there are more staff. So elementary, I've only got about 13, 14 staff. Secondary, it's 3-4 times that many. We collaborated together to say, what do we want this to look like? How do we want to operate? So again, setting your expectations right out of the gate. First day, we do great assemblies. We explain what our policies are. We communicate in letters in August to parents, especially when it was being introduced. This is why we're doing it. This is what it looks like. Here's how we're going to operate. And again, it's around those relationship pieces. So the admin, I've been called in the past 2 years, less than 10 times to deal with a student who dead fastly was refusing to do it. And I literally walk out with them and we talk it out. And by the end of it, the phone's in my hands. staff, one of the things we talked about is what do you do with a cell phone? So if a kid gets a cell phone out, you have to address it. The first few times it's, hey, put it away. Let's not, let's work through this, right? If it's something that's habitual, it's communicating home. It's really important that parents are aware that what's behavior is happening. And then also I'm telling staff, ideally, we don't want them actually taking cell phones. The issue there is certainly we've had discussions around with the union, et cetera. What do you do when you've got a cell phone, a $1,200 device in your hand? So we let admin manage that piece. So if a confiscation has to happen, usually it's admin doing it. Some staff have experimented with what they call a phone, like a cell phone jail, which is basically a spot on their desk where cell phones go if it becomes a bit of an issue. It doesn't happen very often, to be honest. Staff they're on board, like they're in with this. The struggle is, you want me to just throw the struggle that we had with this is supply chain.
We'll come to the
Okay,
struggle.
we're going to come to that. Okay, so really,
come to the
the
struggle part.
expectations right across the board is that that's how staff are going to treat it.
So, quick follow. What I'm hearing is relationship is at the heart of this. You start with verbal reminders. If needed, it gets escalated to you, and parents also get involved. And what was the expectation for? Is it different for elementary and secondary about where does the phone go during the daytime? Is it in their lockers, bags, pockets?
Yeah. So, and there is a reason for it. It is different. So our elementary, every single student in elementary has their own locker. And
Okay.
they all use their locker. Secondary, less than 60% of my secondary kids even bother to use a locker.
Okay.
So that was one we just thought that, like, it's just, we're not winnable in that sense.
Yeah.
So the expectation that it's away, ideally in their bag. Like if you're writing exams, those things are in your bags. Like you get caught on one of them, it's a problem, right? So, and we're getting good traction with that, but most cases, I would be largely hazard to guess that kids have got it tucked in their pockets, which runs its risk when those things start buzzing. But it seems to be having some success with that. But it does look different between the two.
Yep. We can go to, thanks, Scott, basically for sharing those details. We can go to Dean now. Basically, same question. How does the enforcement play out in your school?
I think a big part of the difference is our policy is longer established, and given that because we're talking, this is school year number 6 for a full first bell to last bell. Different, I think I caught Scott saying they're allowed to use it at lunch. That's not the case in our school. Not during transition periods, not during lunch. The decision was made truly the entire day. You're not to be connected to your social media. You're not to be using your phone at all. Enforcement wise, our kids do all have their own lockers, and that is where they are supposed to put their cell phones. Realistically, a large percentage of them must have them in their pockets. If we don't see and we don't know, there isn't an issue because they're not making use of it. I envy what I'm hearing about 10 times in the year, but we also do not issue any warnings at this point. It's a long established policy. So if a student is seen taking out their cell phone, whether it's in class, hallway, cafeteria, you name it, it will be automatically confiscated. It will be confiscated by the intervening staff member, immediately brought to the level office, kept until the end of the day, and the kids have 2 lunchtime detentions to serve as a consequence for not respecting the policy. Now, I can pull it up on my second screen. On an average day, we've probably got somewhere between 5 and 10 kids doing a detention for a cell phone infraction. But that's because we are not giving them those warnings anymore. I suspect that's probably how it began at this point in our process. You should know we're not talking about this anymore. Your cell is mine until the end of the day. And if things become repetitive, that's when we will intervene with include the parents in the process, discuss other potential consequences, but they like being with their friends at lunch. So the idea of losing out on 2 lunch breaks that they don't get to hang out with everybody else is a fairly strong deterrent. The issue, of course, is that there are parts of the building where the staff are less frequently present. So in some strange way, they've decided that bathrooms are excellent locations, not so much to vape, or it's more about cell phone in the boys' room now.
Interesting. Interesting. And if you don't see it, then this is not an issue. Okay, I have some follow-ups on that, but I'll come to those in the next round. Mileva, I want to ask you a question around school challenges and all, but I'll come to that question first. If I can have your perspective about a zoomed out perspective about the policies in different states in US. You just don't have to go one by one, obviously. Just give us a snapshot. How are the policies in most states right now? Policies announced. I'll come to the part of policies practice that you are observing with the schools. That's a separate, but how does it look in the US? Just a quick snapshot.
Sure. Yeah. So there's real momentum now. So in 2025, it was a turning point for phone-free school legislation. There was approximately 35 states that enacted laws or resolutions that were restricting phone use for K through 12 schools. Only about half of them adopted full bell-to-bell ban, so first bell to last bell. The others implemented class time only policies. Many broadened their policies to include personal electronic devices, so not just the cell phone, but the earbuds, the smartwatches, that kind of stuff. In 2026, so right now, 23 additional states have introduced or carried forward legislation, most proposing full bell-to-bell policies. Several of these states previously passed the limited policy, so the policies that were, just class time only, or like just temporary measures, and now they're working to strengthen and make their policies all day full bell to bell, just based off of what they had seen the year prior. What we learned over the past few years is that everyone was looking up for leadership. Teachers were looking to principals, principals were looking to superintendents, superintendents were looking to state legislators, legislators were looking to national policy direction. The problem just kept getting passed up to the next level. What's different right now is that the momentum is working in both directions. So schools are leading from the ground up, and policymakers are responding at the top level. And adoption is happening at multiple levels simultaneously. Interest crosses party lines, which is amazing because this is framed as a child well-being and learning issue. And what we're seeing is a patchwork. Districts and states have moved forward with strong policies. Others are piloting, the lesser policy, but many are actively in conversation about what's going to come next. And we're just really excited to be on the ground working with these legislators, with the school administrators, to really get them to refine those policies from the class time only to be those full bell-to-bell policies where we've really seen the most success.
Yeah, and okay, so that's interesting to hear. And one of the key goal with this webinar series is basically to kind of like amplify the stories of this bottom up, as you are saying, the momentum is in both directions. So good to hear. I mean, that's happening across the border also. So I'll go back to Scott actually about the challenges in implementing this kind of like policy. But and I know Dean touched a little bit about the time scale basically. First or second year of implementing versus 6 years, so maybe challenges will be different than Dean's school, but also like about some of your conversations that you had with staff, but with union around confiscating phone because you kind of decided against it, and some of the things you were mentioning earlier around that you thought maybe make phones out of reach by putting these hooks in place. So those nuances also, and if any kind of like low hanging fruit advices to anyone else who is not waiting for the policy to come from the top down and want to proactively start putting something next year. A long question there, but
Nudge away if I'm not getting to the last part because I would like to. So challenges. So in theory, when you have sevens and eights in the building who come from K-6 schools where they've never been allowed to have their cell phones, that in theory it shouldn't be an issue. But because we're a 7 to 12 school with all those with the secondary kids who up until recently had cell phones, etc., it was a challenge. Our biggest challenge in introductory at the elementary level was that all staff were on board. So it's one thing to say we agree, it's another in the moment to actually enforce it in the classroom. So where we struggle, or if a supply teacher comes in, or in some case, our first year when we did this, where the fires came and they were challenges at first, was when we had our long-term occasional staff that came in and they didn't feel they weren't quite as skilled or as strong or confident enough to be able to address some of these things. So we were, I'd be in there trying to provide support. My vice principal of elementary would be in there trying to provide support. We keep refocusing at staff meetings saying, hey guys, like the only way this is going to work if we're all on the same page. Because the minute one person, then the kids are like, well, I can do something here, but not there. I don't get that. For a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, you're sunk if that happens. Same thing with the secondary, even though the staff were really like, they literally sat like, I call it a kind of a fun ambush in a way, even though because in the staff meeting they said, we demand change, we want change. I'm like, I love the idea of change. Are you all on board to make this thing work? And so I've gotten really significant buy-in with the secondary. Same issue. We have a supply teacher in, which often happens, or a long-term occasional. Somebody's in for a week or 2 weeks, etc. It takes a little while, and the kids they're gonna test the boundaries on that. But those are the kinds of challenges that we've run into. One of the things that we've had to do that makes the biggest difference, I do believe, is that we brought in Paul Davis as a speaker to talk about impacts of cell phones. We brought somebody in to explain the impact of social media on them. We recognize, we also as a staff, we unpacked why it is that we're going after cell phones. Like why are we bothering with this? And it was all about engagement in class. And when we started already, we did some feedback just this year about how do they think it's going. I can share that later, another question. But the why is really important when you're dealing with teenagers. And so, yeah.
And how about some of the conversations about the decision to not confiscate phone at any point, and also like the hooks that you were mentioning in the beginning, that you initially considered putting hooks?
So in terms of not confiscating, so some will do it. Like some will say, hey, particularly if it's a habitual person, they'll say, I want that's, especially if they've got a pretty strong relationship with the kid. But for the most part, that was one of the big hurdles. The staff were like, we're on board, and then, but also, I said, as an administrator, there's only 3 administrators in the building entirety. Yeah. We can't always be everywhere to deal with every single cell phone all the time. Therefore, how are you going to manage this? And they're like, so can we just make sure that they're putting it away? And they're having a lot of success with it. The hooks was something that one of my department heads came up with this idea, but hooks have to be a very special kind. They have to be the kind of the breakaway type. You're putting a hook in a public school, it's a breakaway hook. Thousands of dollars to equip the grade. We were talking about doing it for our grade 9 classrooms to get them more accustomed to it. I don't have the funds. I could not pull that. But we are seeing success. And earlier was mentioned about 10 times. Like I'm talking about kids where they're going toe to toe with somebody to say, I'm not giving my phone up. How many times have we had to take a phone down to the office? It would be a lot more than that. But in terms of real pushback from a kid around, that's about how many times where it was going to potentially turn into a disciplinary issue.
Interesting. I'll go with a similar question to Dean now. Dean, tell us some of the challenges and also like some of the things that you said, like if we can't see the phone, then that's not an issue. But you also kind of like mentioned at the same time the concern around like you cannot be at all the spaces, kind of like what kids are doing. So does it kind of like become too much efforts required, constant efforts required from your staffs and teachers to kind of like keep an oversight if they're taking out phone, which places they are taking out phones and not? So I'm just like, that's one, but other challenges that you think there, and please do mention, you said, I mean, not asking you to share the screen, but you mentioned there that I can share other screens. So I'm assuming that there is a school-wide, some sort of a tracking system that you have in place. Do share that also a little bit.
I think that the answer to your initial question would be different 6 years ago than it is today. We've gone through, as a 7 to 11 school, that's 5 years, right? So all of the kids we have in the building entered the building unable to use their cell phone. So if we went all the way back to 2019, again, before my time here, but the feedback I received is there was a lot more pushback, a lot more resistance. There was all the communication that Scott was referring to, all the why was present. But when you've got a grade 11 kid who's gone through his first 4 years in high school, allowed to do something, and then in his final year, he's no longer allowed it, it's understandable that there's going to be that resistance. So there was more of an issue in those days. And then as we progress through the years, fewer and fewer kids ever had that freedom, at least on paper, right? So I think one piece of advice that I'd offer to anyone considering such a thing is you will need to be patient. You may need to go through a cycle where your sevens or your nines or whatever they are age out and
Mm,
graduate, because once you've made that full cycle, they're fully accustomed to it. The kid
mm,
who was used to things one way and had it changed midstream, that's a little bit more difficult. Um, you asked about just location. Look, the our kids are relatively compliant with this policy in a general sort of way because
yeah.
they do get it. We've had these conversations with them enough. They understand and they will openly say, yeah, you know what? It is a stress off my mind. It is less of a distraction. I don't feel the need to check that message, reply to that post or whatever it is. So
Mm,
they get that piece, but then at lunchtime, they know they're not supposed to be doing X, Y, and Z in certain areas, and the temptation overwhelms them. But the funny thing is, in better weather, I like to get off campus where the kids are, because for our 9 to 11s, they're allowed to go off campus at lunch. And I don't see kids on their phones, and they're off campus. It's not even an issue because they're out playing soccer. They're climbing on believe it or not, climbing on the jungle gyms and swings as if they were still 8 years old. But it's, I would suggest that it's become a natural part of their culture that we
mm,
just do other things, right?
mm,
We
mm.
don't need to be attached to our cell phone until we get home, and that's all we do in the evening.
And your so that's helpful. Your part about like tracking at the school level. Do you do that?
Well, I mean, what I was saying about my other screen is I was just looking at our lunchtime detention list. So it's here on the right-hand side. So I
Okay.
can tell you on February 25th, we had one, two, three, four, five, six, seven phones and two sets of earpods.
So basically, this is like teachers. This is a shared sheet where your staff members enter these details
This
and
all
you
goes through the office.
yeah,
So if something is turned in,
yeah.
it's an automatic. The level secretary is plugging it straight into the detention list.
Okay.
And that's the thing is we're not getting the arguments at all anymore.
Okay.
So
Sure.
if a kid gets busted, it's, yeah, I know. I shouldn't have, as
Yeah.
opposed to what are you talking about? I should be allowed. No, they get it now. They
Mm,
didn't get it in 2019, 2021 necessarily. But
yeah.
now that we've gone through that full cycle,
Yeah.
it's just, oops, sorry, I slipped. I gave in to temptation I shouldn't have. And then, we were having conversations with kids who were spending a little bit too long in the washroom, wink, wink, saying,
Yeah.
yo, you vaping in there? What's going on? No, sir, it's like the one place I can go to check my phone.
It's,
Well, I guess I can take that. I'd prefer it over cannabis vape.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. Um, Interesting. Mileva, so tell us if you are hearing some of the similar challenges across the US and also this kind of like a spectrum as we are hearing like Scott School is like a couple of years into rolling out this policy and Dean's School is like 6 years the policy is in place. So are these kind of like common stages that we see? Give us some insight at that school level and also your customized support that you provide to schools. A little bit about that. How does that look like?
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So schools that succeed report clear classroom focus, stronger student-teacher relationships, fewer behavioral disruptions, and significantly improved instructional time. Teachers are often telling us that the most noticeable shift is simply that students are more present in the classroom. Conversations are lasting longer, the engagement deepens, and the overall climate just feels calmer for them. Common concerns that we hear from every school that we talk to at the beginning include some of the same things: parent or staff pushback, parent staff buy-in, questions around enforcement logistics, how are you going to make it work, equitable access to communication during safety. Those are all real and manageable challenges, and we help support that through the toolkits that we have developed, and connecting them with other schools who have had those successes. So they're not just hearing it from us, but they're able to talk to another school who has gone through the same process, has worked out the kinks for themselves, and they're able to kind of connect with each other. One important pattern that we have observed is that the schools with the most sustained successes have implemented those full bell-to-bell all-day policies. When schools dilute the model policy a little bit to just class time only or allow the passing periods, they often find themselves in constant enforcement mode. They're constantly policing those phones. The negotiating phone use during transitions, lunch, or free periods become a little bit more difficult. That inconsistency here in the US creates a lot more friction and actually increases the burden back on the teachers. So by the end of the year, those policies we've seen kind of have failed. Several schools that initially adopted class time only policies have actually strengthened their policies later and are experiencing, because of the challenge of their experiences, they're now going to full bell to bell policies. The biggest factors for success for us really remain around strong leadership, consistent and clear messaging, thoughtful teacher trainings, and giving the students a positive narrative. We don't want them to think that this is a ban, you're being punished. It's really framed around restoration or restoring the ability for you to have all of the social and emotional things that you need, restoring your focus, helping you build better relationships, restoring the learning environments. And so we've learned, nobody wants to be told that they're doing something wrong. And so when you use the words like we're banning your phones, you're no longer allowed to have them, it instantaneously gets those kids to shut down. And I'm not saying that you need the kids to agree with you, but you do need them to not feel like they're coming at this from a negative place. And so we also work with schools to try to help them find that right language that works for them. And we're actually this year working on a student campaign where it's really going to be all about posters and messaging that students can be excited about so that it helps build that momentum for them as well.
Interesting, and I'm hearing this like across, like Scott was mentioning about the relationship, and Dean also said about the conversations part. So this connection with the youth and trying to explain them, and also kind of like include them into the why. So that part is interesting. Mileva, a quick follow up. So the schools that you work with, did this question come up about like if we confiscate phone for the entire day or stuff like that? Who is responsible for the device if the device gets stolen, broken, and if this actually happened, if you can give any insight into that, and then Dean might have to jump in after that. Yeah.
Sure. So for us, we really advocate that the phones aren't on the student at all. It's not in their locker. It's not in their book bag, that it is put in some type of device, whether it's a phone locker, a yonder pouch. We've seen schools, actually, there's a school in DC who organized their phones in like pencil pouches they bought. They were 80 cents. They put them in a pencil pouch and stored them by homeroom classrooms. It becomes the responsibility of wherever they're housed. So if it's housed in that homeroom classroom, that teacher puts it in their closet, and that's where it stays till the end of the day. We have not heard from any single school yet who has enforced the policy and made it through implementation that has had issues with a phone disappearing, a phone being broken. Obviously, nobody wants to have to go to the blame game. Like, you took my child's phone, it's now broken, that it can be a very messy situation. But the reality is, and from all the schools that have adopted this, we really want the phones away from the students. And I recognize not everybody can, not everybody has the same equitable resources to have the same financial abilities to purchase things, which is why we brought up the example of like a pencil pouch. Like, they could not afford the yonder pouches, so that they got a pencil pouch. And we actually witnessed it. We went to this school and we watched it happen. It was one of the most seamless processes ever. It took two teachers. Students walked in, they said phones, they put them in their pencil pouch, put it in their homeroom bin. The students kept on going. The teachers moved those bins to the office, and it was locked in the office. There are times where kids have to leave early, so they go to wherever that phone's stored. They get their phone from that person, and they leave the building. If they're coming back, same process. They're putting it right back in whatever their storage method is, and giving it back. The process really works. What we've seen makes it more difficult is the lack of communication. So if there's any ambiguity around like how it's happening, if there's any question or a question that's not answered for people, and they're left wondering like, well, is this really working? That's where the challenges start to come in, because then you get a lot more pushback. But if you're clear and consistent with the communication and enforcement across the board, we have not seen many people pushing back on this.
Okay, interesting. Go ahead, Dean, and then we'll take some questions from the audience.
Thanks, Rajendra. I just wanted to dig into that communication piece a little bit, because I think it would be beneficial for others to know a bit more about our experience. So when the initial policy was brought in, it was actually not in the building at all, not even just bell to bell. So first thing in the morning couldn't happen. They could not be using them all the way until the end of after school activities. So obviously at that point, the office is probably closed. They need to be able to call mom or dad for the lift home. That was allowed. We're an early start school, so we're finished by 2:25. So by 3:30, in some cases, I think they changed it along the way back to 3. Until that time, kids were not allowed to use their phone, period, but within that time frame. But the spring before I got here, apparently there was a letter written by students to say, look, we got teachers coming jumping on us when we just got off the school bus and we're texting mom to say, oh, shoot, I forgot my lunch. Can you bring it to me? And there was an enforcement issue and it became a disciplinary issue. And same thing after school, it just became problematic in that way because it became too much of a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So a very strong student leader wrote a letter to the school,
Mm-hmm.
and that was brought to our I don't know what you call it in different areas. For us, it's school council, a teacher body,
Mm-hmm.
and it was actually listened to. So the decision at the staff level was made based on that feedback from the students. You know what? Then we'll go bell to bell. So I
Mm-hmm.
arrived in this school in beginning of the 24-25 school year
Mm-hmm.
with that bell to bell policy. And the feedback I received is the kids were significantly more compliant
Mm-hmm.
because they had a win. Right now, I'm not saying go hard and scale back, but it's about having that student voice and listening to their concerns as well,
Mm-hmm.
because they deserve to have that voice.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Very, very concrete example there of like including student voice into how policy is thought about and put in place. Um, we'll go to audience question, but before we go there, I have a kind of like a request to anyone who is listening to this. So for our next webinars, lined up 3 more, we are still seeking Canadian examples who are leading this on the ground in a systematic manner. They don't need to be necessarily bell to bell, but systematically across the school. So if you have recommendations, please, of the school leaders or the school district leaders that we should kind of connect to and bring them for our webinars that we can chat with, please write to me. So I don't want to keep this particular important request to the end, but now let's dive into audience kind of quick. Mileva, do you have a quick thing to jump in before we go?
Very, very quickly, because I wanted to make sure I mentioned it before we got too many questions. For everybody who is listening, we obviously are the Phone Free Schools movement in the United States. We have an amazing boots on the ground partner, Angie Clark, who is our Phone Free Schools movement Canada representative. So anybody who is working in Canada who wants to connect not just with us, but with somebody physically in your country, Angie's there, and her email address is canada@phonefreeschoolsmovement.org. She is an extension of us. She's doing the exact same work in Canada, but obviously making sure that the toolkits and all of the resources we have are built to model what Canadians need. And so I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that she was there. Obviously, you can always reach us as well, but Angie is there for you guys in Canada.
Yeah, thanks for that. And obviously, like anyone, if you need to connect to Angie and can't remember the email, reach out to me and I'll make the connection forward. So so yeah, I mean, there are a few questions, and thank you, Scott, actually going ahead and kind of answering those, specifically some which are kind of like which were more towards you. And then there is one question that I kind of wanted to broaden a little bit and ask both Scott and Dean. This about how do you address the exceptions, basically, if there are children with chronic illnesses such as diabetes or kind of like the need for accessibility or learning stuff. So this question a little bit broader: how do you genuinely address exceptions, and how do you distinguish between genuine exception needs and exception needs that kind of come to you but doesn't appear so genuine to you? So maybe Dean, you can go first, and then Scott.
The only exceptions that we have, I think I saw in the Q&A, was for students with diabetes, because a lot of them there's a monitor that communicates directly with their cell. So that's an automatic. We received that request from the family, and it's a no questions asked. We advised their teachers. We actually created a little card that they can show to say, yep, it's valid. I'm not just making it up. So they have something on them that they can tuck into their cell phone cover. So that, I mean,
Yeah.
our cell phone policy is only so important. If a kid's blood sugar crashes, we don't want a child to be ill as a result of our policy. So no, that's an automatic exception. No
Yeah.
hesitation.
And Scott, exceptions in your school?
Yeah, we'd be the same thing with we have plans of care for kids with chronic medical conditions, and so that's all part of the communication with parents. So, if a student required a cell phone to monitor blood sugar, etc., that's a non issue. Like we're not even going there. Like it is, you need it, you got it. No issues there. But we haven't typically run into something. Usually, the question was, how do I get a hold of my kid? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like if they're not feeling well, how do I get a hold of my kid? And that's the more of a typical one. And our answer to that is you just call our office. There's no way that the phone's going unanswered, and we will deal with them immediately. So, and we've had really no issues there. Where other challenges that students have sought exceptions, students with IEPs that are individual education plans that are looking for accommodations around, some case noise cancellation. Well, great. We have headphones for that. That can solve that one. But also wanting to listen to music for some kids, legitimately, it helps. But we're actually experimenting more with an older technology, like MP3 players, to address that rather than cell phones, because we know that once the cell phone's out, there's no way it's going to be contained just to that. So we've had kids that want to wear their head, they wanted to wear their earbuds, and they got their phone playing in their locker. And I said, no, we can't do that, guy. Like, but we're working that out. But those are always conversations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. One quick question to basically let's start with you, Scott. Scott, so what is like one support that you wish you had from people who are outside your school system? So not your staff, not the parents, not the students, not you, not the leadership, but people who are outside your school system. What is one support that you wish you had from them? Those could be obviously board ministry, but others also that can help with this policy.
Yeah, I think it's for us, it's the ongoing attempts to try to help kids and families see the imperative of this, right? So for us, like Screenagers Project, I imagine a number of you have already heard about it. We've got 50 licenses. We're using that. It's something along those lines, which we couldn't afford on our own, but because the board has provided it, so we're going right into the classroom with using that kind of thing. So the supports campaigns that starting when kids are younger. We can't be starting this in secondary. Like really, I know they have policies that say kids can't use it, but you walk out, you go out for dinner, you see someone handing an iPad to a 5-year-old. Like it happens all over the place. Is the greater the campaign is out there to try to nudge kids and families away from the reliance on technology, especially around social media, that's music to us.
Mm-hmm. And Dean, what support you wish you?
So some of the feedback I received is in the early years there was, well, it's not fair. My friend at the other school doesn't have to deal with this, right? Like, how come we have to be this way in our school?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that effective August 2025, there's a
Mm-hmm.
province-wide policy,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of helpful, right? Because at least those conversations are off the table now, right? There's no more
Mm-hmm.
questioning necessary. Well, why is it this way? Ask the ministry, man. I mean, we've had it here all year for years, but now it's a province-wide thing. They're like, yeah, well, they're not even asking those questions because
Mm-hmm.
now, so having the whether it's a district or a provincial or countrywide thing is a big help because it takes some of the pressure off the schools. We have to figure out the details of the how, of course, because it will be different depending on how you choose to enforce things. But
Mm-hmm.
having a broader policy to support us makes life so much easier.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, so well, I mean, that's it basically. That's our time. Thank you so much, Dean, Scott, Mileva, everyone for your time and also your expertise to share these details with us. And also thank you everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate it. This is the first webinar. We hope to do 3, 4 more at least, and find the right kind of voices who are leading this work from the front in terms of implementation. So please do tune in for the next ones also. Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone.